Hey everyone, welcome back to L2Games, and welcome to episode 13 of the L2Games podcast. It's been way too long since we've done one of these, so in case you've forgotten, I'm your host Nick, and I am joined once again today by the amazing Kyle. Kyle, how are you doing today?
Much better after that adjective. Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Well, you're very welcome, and you are amazing. You are. Just take it in for a second. You are
Well,
amazing.
uh,
All right, so today we're going to be talking about what I feel is kind of a trending topic in the gaming industry in the last several years for sure, and that is the delay. As I'm sure many of you have already seen, this past week we got the news that Starfield and Redfall, the two big releases from Bethesda this year, have now been delayed into 2023. So, Kyle, I want to get your initial reaction to that news. What do you make of that?
complete unsurprise. I do not think that it ever occurred to me that some of those would be coming out in like the next coming while. It's like with a lot of games, like we talked about Harry Potter in the last episode that we did together, or Hogwarts Legacy.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's been so long that it was announced and we're told it was coming to when we are actually getting it, that at this point I'm kind of just numb to any feeling, any announcements, any like, oh, this is delayed, oh, this is coming out when, sooner than you think. I just have no feeling because it's just so long already.
Yeah, and totally I agree that my first reaction when I saw Starfield is delayed is, again, total unsurprise. Not only that, but I kind of thought to myself, oh wow, finally. Because it seems like these days no AAA game is complete in its development cycle without at least one delay. And given that we're 6 months, 7 months away from the end of 2022 and we still haven't seen any gameplay out of Starfield, yeah. I was sure that a delay was coming, and it was just a matter of when that was going to happen. So, yeah, I'm not at all surprised by that. But do you think that's maybe a bit of a problem with the gaming industry these days, is that we're not surprised by delays anymore?
I don't know if it's a problem, because I think that a lot of people a lot of gamers have accepted the fact that a delayed game will be good. You just have to wait, or like you hope that it's going to be good because it's getting the extra effort and the extra time. I think we've been burnt so many times by games that came out on their expected release date and were rushed, clearly, that a lot of people now, even though maybe they can get a little bit impatient and maybe the problem is you announce things too early, but I think now people are just like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, just get it done. I don't think there's a lot of hate for delays nowadays.
See, that's an interesting thought to me, because on the one hand, you would think that a delay means that they're taking the time to polish the game up and ensure that it will be a quality release. But looking back on it, there are a few games that come to my mind that I know were delayed, and yet they still came out in an absolutely bizarre state, completely broken, game-breaking bugs everywhere, visuals not up to par, frame drops, and the culprits I'm going to point out here are Cyberpunk 2077,
Yep.
Marvel's Avengers,
Yep.
and Battlefield 2042. All of those games were delayed by Battlefield 2042, I think, was only a few months. Cyberpunk was delayed, I think, a couple years, if I remember correctly. And Marvel's Avengers was delayed at least a year. And yet all of them came out in completely broken states.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering then if delays, really, I'm not sure. It's just like, on the one hand, it does make sense to delay something when it's not ready. But at the same time, it isn't always a guarantee that we're going to get a better product in the end. And even another one, GTA, the GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition, the remaster of the GTA 3, San Andreas, and Vice City, when that came out, it was loaded with bugs, despite the fact that it had also been delayed.
Yeah, I think, and I kind of mentioned this just then, but like I think part of the problem isn't necessarily on the developers. It's on the studios and the overhead management.
Yeah, the
that is
publishers.
saying, we need to put in a date. We need to get a hard date, or a year, or even like a season that we can plant our game, because we want our game in this season and we don't want anyone else coming around us. But because they put that out there, because they say, hey, we're coming out here, this is when you can expect this piece of gaming, they have to then say, oh, actually, we're delaying. Oh, we're pushing it back. And when, well, all they needed to do, if they really needed to say that, like, this game is coming, be ready for it, just don't put a date out there. I mean, just say coming soon. Or even just don't announce it until you are starting to see that you can achieve everything that you want to achieve by a certain date. But I think that's the problem.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I think that is the reason why we see so many delays, is that these publishers are so much more worried about their bottom line, and they want to say, okay, for this fiscal quarter, we need to have this game coming out, and we need to announce it early so that people can, you know, we've got the time to build up the hype for it. People can get on board with it. We can get all of our pre-orders in, and then our finances for that quarter are covered before we even reach it. We don't need to worry about making a profit in that time span. We keep our shareholders happy, and then we can just move on to the next project. And to an extent, I think that is hurting gaming, because you end up with these publishers who announce these release dates so far in advance that the developers are all of a sudden forced to hit a target, and I think that ends up leading to a rushed product, and that's when we end up seeing games like a Cyberpunk, like a Marvel's Avengers, because I think one of the things that happens is that when you start from a point of having to rush to a deadline, even if that deadline does get delayed, now you've got a product that up until that delay was announced was being rushed. And so now you've kind of got just this absolute mess of a piece of work that you've got to try and unmess up before you ultimately release it.
Yeah, and like that's why I think crunch is such a big issue in the gaming industry, is because of these arbitrary release dates that are set by the people that aren't on the ground floor developing. And so the other people actually making the game have to then go and pick up slack, or and like bust their ass, giving like just stupid, unlivable hours of work towards a game because they're expected to reach a certain deadline, and it ends up coming out badly because they, you know, they aren't putting their all effort into it. It's the whole like, should we work 5 days a week or 4 days a week? Well, 4 days a week, are you going to be happier in your work? Are you going to get more productive? It's just like that, but on like an escalated level, because you're doing so much more work and you're not putting your entire heart and soul in, and you could probably get exhausted.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention, you know, the publishers and not being on the ground floor with the developers as far as setting these deadlines, because we're seeing more and more lately that private equity firms are getting involved in buying large portions of game publishers and developers, and these are guys who, like, their whole career is just investing in things and buying businesses. They don't really, you know, they aren't necessarily passionate about gaming, but rather making money. And so, you know, it's not really about putting out a quality product to them. It's not about putting out a work of art. It is just about the bottom line.
And it's an easy industry to look at and think, oh man, I'm gonna get into that, because it is now like the largest form of entertainment, like the largest industry and of entertainment, like surpassed movies, surpassed TV, surpassed, I don't know if it's surpassed music, probably.
Yeah. I think as far as gross revenues, it has surpassed all other industries, because you look at GTA 5, as far as its total revenue it's brought in, I think it's still the highest grossing piece of media ever released, that including all units sold plus microtransactions. And see, I'm just gonna look up the number here real quick. So yeah, since its release, this is a 2021 article, November 2021, that I'm looking at. GTA 5's gross revenue has been more than $6 billion.
Oh my god.
which is absolutely disgusting. Although, to be fair, you look at movies in the box office, their run is, maybe 3 months, and then from there on out, it's just home video release, and, who buys Blu-rays anymore?
A small group of us, okay?
But, then you've got a game like GTA, and it's got its almost a decade-old lifespan now, and
Yeah.
of course, it's not hard to see why it brings in that amount of money. But, again, I feel like one of the reasons we've seen a game like GTA, which has been re-released now multiple times, is because of these business decisions that are being made, not because people care about crafting this work of art of a video game. Not to say that GTA isn't a good game. GTA 5 is an amazing game, but it has been re-released multiple times now. And even the latest release, the expanded and enhanced PS5 Xbox Series X edition, was itself delayed. It fell victim to these delays.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite podcasts, The Weekly Planet, they always say delayed but not dismayed. So I think that is a good, what's it called? Mantra to live by? A good motto. Because I nowadays, I don't really worry when I see things getting delayed. But yeah, other people might feel differently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm always skeptical regardless, because there's a chance of getting another Cyberpunk or another Marvel's Avengers, but I do agree that when a game is in a state where if you release it is ultimately going to hurt the final product, then a delay isn't necessarily bad. I just worry that it's become a little too commonplace in gaming, and I kind of wish that the industry could get back to a point of not announcing things until they're almost ready. And this is one of the things I love about Nintendo. Other business practices aside, like their ridiculous prices for DLC and never having a markdown on first-party games, Nintendo does an amazing job of not announcing stuff until it's almost ready to go. And the big example that sticks out to me, just because it's my personal favorite game of all time, is Majora's Mask 3D. So, after Ocarina of Time 3D released on the Nintendo 3DS, I was waiting and expecting a Majora's Mask 3D, because how can you not follow up Ocarina of Time 3D? It's most of the same assets, same engine. You might as well just release the follow-up too. And Majora's Mask 3D was not announced until November of 2014. It released in February of 2015. That's a pretty short turnaround from announcement to release, and I respect that so much about Nintendo.
They're not perfect with it, though. I mean, Breath of the Wild, it was supposed to be a Wii U exclusive and release in 2015.
That's
then
true.
It released with the Switch in 2017, and now we're seeing it with Breath of the Wild 2, and also something like Metroid Prime 4, which had to completely restart development, and I liked that they were open about that.
Yeah.
And something like Bayonetta 3, which was announced when the Switch was coming out, or a couple of years after the Switch come out, and it's been more years than I think any other game from announcement to when it's supposed to come out.
Yeah.
But
and even Animal Crossing also did get delayed, so you're absolutely right. Nintendo is not immune to it, but generally I think they still do a good job compared to Western game developers of keeping a tight lid on things until they're ready to reveal it. I think one of the issues has been with modern gamers being so hooked into everything as far as news and updates and release dates and stuff, and leakers and everything everywhere. I think there's a bit of pressure on Nintendo to sort of conform with Western game developers, both in terms of things like their announcement of release dates, but also things like DLC and stuff like that. Nintendo never used to be big on DLC, but now it's sort of becoming the norm for them too.
Well, yeah, look how long it took to get Mario Kart DLC. The fact that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is, first of all, a remaster version of the Wii U version on the Switch, and it's been, 5 years now?
Yeah.
And it's just getting, DLC? That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, that is nuts. But again, I think Nintendo does a fantastic job of keeping a lid on things until it's ready. And at the very least, when they do tend to announce release dates in advance, it's never like a solid date, but more of a release window. And I think, like, as a publisher, as a developer, if you're going to announce something ahead of time, I feel like that's more what you should be going for. Because so many times it's just this very arbitrary yet highly specific date that they're shooting for. And you're like, how can they know 3 years in advance that that is the day that it's going to come out?
Yeah. Well, I think it's like, it's maybe where they've gotten caught up in comparison to something like movies. Because movies and movie studios want to set a release date for films so that they know that they have that weekend. Especially something like a Marvel, Disney, they want to have those dates planted so that people book around them, basically give them a wide berth. Because, and I mean, it's good for the other studios because they're like, okay, well, I don't want to put my movie the next week or on the same day as a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
But games are totally different because, like, well, movies do get delayed. It's not to the extent of where, like, you know, there could be fundamental issues that make the movie unplayable.
Yeah.
Like, it's something totally different. And so I think games might have gotten caught up in that, where they're like, oh, we need to place a release date.
I think that's a brilliant point on this too, is that you look at movies aren't really interactive media the same way games are, and so it's not like someone's gonna go see a movie and all of a sudden explore and poke around in it and find a movie breaking bug or anything. Whereas with a video game, when that gets moved around or rushed or released ahead of time, and you know, before it's ready, people poke around and they find things that maybe the people who created the game missed, because they have the opportunity to interact with it in a way you can't interact with a movie. And so by setting that hard release date, yeah, you want people playing your game that weekend, you want it to be the hot thing, but unlike a movie, people can interact with your game and they can find the parts where you fucked up.
Yeah. This is a great quote, I think, from Miyamoto about unreleased games. I'm gonna try and find it real quick. Oh yeah, Miyamoto of Nintendo, his famous quote: "A delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad." And he said
I like that.
on the work for Ocarina of Time, announced in '95 and ultimately released in '98. So this is not a new concept. It has just become very, very apparent and pretty rampant nowadays that games are delayed.
Yeah, and again, I think it's come with the growth of the gaming industry and private equity firms and other investors wanting to get their paws in on the pretty lucrative business of video games, and they do want to have their financials secured for the future.
I mean, at the end of the day, gaming is an art form, and like I think some people don't view it as an art form, especially these private equity firms and like the money people, because they just want the big dollar signs that are attached to the gaming industry, but they don't respect that just like movies, just like TV shows, just like music, there are artists that are making the stories, the scenery, the whole shebang of this game. And sometimes art takes time. Like, you can't just rush art and expect it to be, you know, enjoyed by the masses. Like, it's gonna be good if you give these artists some time.
Absolutely.
Just get your hands off of the plot for a sec.
Yeah, and I know people complain about developers like Rockstar taking forever with their development cycles to release a game. You know, Red Dead Redemption 2 took however many years, and GTA 6 we're not going to see until I'm 50 years old. But Rockstar consistently releases high-quality games, and I think Take-Two, their parent company, is one of the few that seems to, at least to some extent, understand that there is a level of art that goes into these games, and if you want to be profitable long-term, you need to respect the developers enough to let them have the leeway to actually turn their game into a work of art.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that's going to do it for us today. Kyle, thank you again for hopping in here for this quick episode of the L2Games podcast.
Always a pleasure, and I'm glad this one was delayed.
Yep, and apologies to everyone who was waiting on our next episode and didn't get it in time. I didn't want to announce a release date ahead of time for fears that this would be a rushed piece of garbage. But for those of you who did tune in and stick around for this whole episode, thanks for listening. Make sure you like and subscribe to L2 Games for more content like this. We'll see you guys in the next one.
Bye.